Well, shit. I guess the NBA universe is now officially flipped on its head as we know it. I couldn't watch the Bucks Heat Game 5 yesterday because I was at Golden One Center to take in Game 5 of Warriors Kings. I did see the Heat Bucks game in some chunks. I did see the crazy Jimmy alley-oop. It happened while the Warriors Kings was like late in the third quarter, or if I remember correctly. But I was able to sneak in the last possession before overtime on my phone, and then, kind of kept an eye on it on my phone. But I really didn't watch it, so I had to rewatch it late last night when I got home. I don't even want to talk about the Bucks and what they did wrong yet, because there's plenty to dissect there, and the Bucks have a lot of big offseason questions this upcoming summer. But I want to praise the performance of Jimmy Butler, who once again continues to show out in the playoffs. And I'm never going to leave Jimmy Butler out of my top 10 ever again, because it's very clear that he is always going to be very good to elite in the regular season, like he usually is, and he's just going to turn the fuck up in the playoffs. And the fact that the Heat have been struggling all year, especially on offense, up and down play, make the play in, get crushed by the Hawks, especially on the glass, and then barely beat Chicago in the final seconds of that game to make it to this matchup, and then stare down Giannis, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, a defense that was top 3 in the NBA, and he just gave him the fucking business the entire series. My God. The numbers themselves, 37.6 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, nearly 5 assists per game, on 59.7% shooting, and over 44% from 3 on over 5 attempts per game. And the funny thing about, Jimmy Butler is that starting around the time he got traded to the Sixers, he started taking less threes when he was traded to Philadelphia, and then as he got to Miami, the shot just kept evolving. It looks a lot different. His jump shot looks a lot different than it did earlier in his career, but he just suddenly decides to shoot threes in the playoffs, becomes a mid-range master. The footwork in the post and driving to the basket is just immaculate. Every type of defender got the business from Jimmy Butler. The matchup stats, when you look at the matchup stats, those are even crazier, because Drew Holiday got the Jimmy Butler assignment primarily throughout the series. And listen to this. Jimmy Butler went 26 for 46 against Drew Holiday whenever Drew Holiday was guarding Jimmy Butler. That's good for a cool 56.5%. So Jimmy Butler shot 56.5% against Drew Holiday. Against Giannis, he was 6 for 7. Against Brook Lopez, especially when, they're in that drop coverage, Jimmy Butler went 19 for 30. There were also just some outright drives where he drove right at Brook Lopez. Like in last night's game, he had a sick reverse layup in the fourth quarter where he just took Brook Lopez baseline and did a nice reverse before Brook could, come over and block the shot. Like, Jimmy Butler was just doing this all series. It kind of exposed the Bucks' lack of athletic younger wings, but that in itself wasn't the big issue. Jimmy Butler just gave the work to the Bucks' 3 best defenders, and they were attacking him in a multitude of ways. Obviously, Brook Lopez is not guarding Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy Butler was destroying the base of the Bucks' coverage, which was the drop, which Brook Lopez is in a lot. Whenever Giannis was switched on him or Giannis came over to help, Jimmy Butler would fake him out with pivots and foot fakes and layups. It was a masterclass from Jimmy Butler on both sides of the floor, by the way, because he made some insane defensive plays last night as well. And when you compare the insane 56-point performance he had in Game 4, last night he had 42, 8, and 4, and that didn't feel like a Jimmy dominating the entire game type of game, which sounds insane. He kind of just chiseled away himself into a great game. He just, found ways. In the fourth quarter, he took over. I felt so bad for Drew Holiday because he was talking all types of mad shit, and I need to see maybe some clips from the Bucks broadcast, because they had some alternate angles where the camera was more on Jimmy and Drew in moments where, you know, free throws are being shot or whatever, and Jimmy was just talking mad shit. By the way, Memphis Grizzlies, take note, stand on what you believe in, and look at Jimmy Butler talking shit while down 6 points. That man knew he was going to be a problem for the Bucks. Regardless if he was winning or losing, he was talking shit. And he was just giving Drew Holiday the business, man. And this is a Heat team that, you know, I've underestimated the last few years. Last year, I did not think the Heat would make the Eastern Conference Finals even as the 1 seed, and they did. This year, I was like, oh, okay, PJ Tucker, you know, coming to Philadelphia and leaving Miami, that kind of left a hole for the Heat. And, you know, they scuttle around. Their offense is struggling. All their shooters regress. Duncan Robinson didn't play until this series. I love the playoffs because Duncan Robinson all of a sudden is back in our lives and, you know, shooting the shit out of the ball. And kind of the Heat's offense has kind of been greased up a little bit thanks to Duncan Robinson's movement. His dribble handoff chemistry with Bam is still the same, and they were kind of getting some good plays out of that, especially to start the fourth quarter when the Bucks were up 16 going into the fourth quarter. And with Jimmy Butler on the bench, the Heat cut the lead to 8. And as I was watching last night, I was like, man, they gave up. The run ended up being an 11-1 run to open up the fourth quarter with Jimmy Butler on the bench. And I was just like, this is what we're on, Milwaukee. But again, I don't want to talk about Milwaukee in this video because I'm going to have a different video about them later. But all credit to Jimmy Butler. All credit to Eric Spoelstra, who yesterday got his 100th playoff win as a head coach, which is now top 5 in NBA history. Spoelstra pushing the right buttons, getting Duncan Robinson back in there. Kyle Lowry survived in his minutes, even though he looks older and just, you know, is a shell of himself at this point. He gave the Heat some crucial minutes and, you know, some timely threes, especially, you know, in Game 4. Game 5, you know, he gave it his best, fouled out. The crazy thing is, 3 Heat players fouled out by the time the game reached overtime, and the Bucks just still couldn't get it done. Giannis with a bunch of turnovers. Giannis going 10 for 23 from the free throw line. It was just crazy. But all credit to the Heat, man. This is why people were scared to play the Heat. I can tell you as a Sixer fan, I much rather would have played the Nets than the Heat, and you can kind of see why. Because playoff Jimmy Butler is a real thing, and he just turns into a top 5 player when it's playoff time. And he stared the Bucks, Giannis, who is arguably the best player on the planet. Brook Lopez is going to come in second for Defensive Player of the Year. Drew Holiday, who, like Giannis and Brook, are going to all make All-NBA defense. For Jimmy Butler to stare that team down the barrel and probably just smile, laughing maniacally, and to just eviscerate them in every single way possible is one of the more impressive performances I've ever seen from a player. And that 56-point burger was just, that was incredible. The Heat stealing Game 1 in Milwaukee. And yes, Giannis was hurt for 2 3/4 of those games, but the Bucks still should have, for all intents and purposes, beat the Heat without Giannis. And that just wasn't the case. The Bucks were a good team all year, and the Giannis injury really doesn't fly by me as an excuse. The Bucks still, you know, they were the number 1 seed, a title favorite. They should have been able to, you know, come out of the first round against an 8th seed, but they didn't. Jimmy Butler eviscerated them, and the Bucks have some major questions to answer this offseason. But this video is all about Jimmy Butler, who once again showed himself to be one of the absolute best players in the NBA. And it's the playoffs, so he had to remind y'all.